If they're being impossible, as most children are most of the time, I put on my scar voice and they just go terrified. It's wonderful. I get a bit of peace. The Lion King.
Life's not fair, is it? You see, I shall never be king. And you shall never see the light of another day. And you.
Didn't your mother ever tell you not to play with your food?
The Lion King, I was working at Stratford, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they said, could I do this? And I assumed that I would see a screen with a lion doing that, and I'd have to try to make my voice do this, what his mouth was doing. But no, we arrived in some studio in London, or some room, and I can't remember, it was big, and all around the walls they had the sort of storyline pictured. There were people with video cameras. I sat at a desk and they would throw lines at me. Video cameras would shoot me, and there were people sketching me. Then about 4 months later, we'd meet again, where I remember the second time, I think it was in Canada, I was shooting there, and they all came and they had got more stuff together and were beginning to sort of find the character, and we tried more lines and more ideas, and once again they were still looking at me and videoing me. Then I saw the film, and there I was really upset, because, you know, James Earl Jones, muscular and wonderful, fantastic mane and rippling with muscle and gloriousness. And I was this scraggy, sort of mangy looking lion, you know, thin bulge, and terrible tail, terrible mane, and I thought, is that what they saw when they were, I thought they were drawing, you know, anyway, they weren't. And I was very, very upset. Even more so, of course, when we saw it at Radio City Music Hall for the premiere. And when he dies at the end, the whole audience stood up and roared. And I thought, this is not possible. He was a wonderful character. Why are you so happy? But it was a great experience, very free.
An elephant graveyard is no place for a young prince. Oops.
An elephant what? Whoa.
Oh dear, I've said too much. Well, I suppose you'd have found out sooner or later. You being so clever and all. Oh, just do me one favor. Promise me you'll never visit that dreadful place.
Jeffrey Katzenberg called me in the house I was staying in Italy and said, The Lion King is a huge success, and a big part of that is your character. And I was very pleased and hoped that I'd get something in the post as a thank you, because I remember, who played Mrs. Doubtfire? Robin Williams, that's right. Robin did work for Disney. Now, Disney don't pay very much money. I mean, they don't. And Robin called them and said after Mrs. Doubtfire, I've made a fortune for your company and you paid me a tiny fee. And in the post, he got a Picasso. I hoped maybe Jeffrey would, you know, put that in his pocket, but I didn't anyway. They were very pleased with me, but no, I didn't get a Picasso.
You're in trouble again. But this time, Daddy isn't here to save you. And now everyone knows why.
Simba!
Have I ever frightened children? I do it all the time. If they're being impossible, as most children are most of the time, I put on my scar voice and they just go terrified. It's wonderful. I get a bit of peace. Die Hard with a Vengeance.
I thought this was a currency exchange.
Oh, I think we'd go straight to the withdrawal. Uncle Barry?
He's sort of me, really. I thought he was a wonderful character. He lived outside society, he did his own rules. He took blame for what he did if it went wrong. But games and playing with people, that suited my personality. I found it very easy to slip in to Simon. I thought he should be blonde, because I'd always wanted to try blonde, and short-haired. We were doing costumes down on 44th Street or something. Somebody produced that T-shirt, and I said, let me try that on. I put it on, I thought, that's the one, that's the one. And I just thought, there's the man. And obviously, Bruce was affected by this, because in his next movie, He had short blonde hair and a turquoise t-shirt. So he obviously knew it worked. I mean, it's lovely when you're playing that sort of character who does what they want, because you can look like you want to.
Got to take a safety catch off. Oh, God! See, that works. Now, where's McLean?
I think it probably goes back to Mike Nichols, who I remember in The Real Thing when he was directing that on stage with Glenn Close and I. Glenn has a moment where she has to confess to being unfaithful. We were rehearsing it, and Mike said, try doing it with a Mars bar. So we got a Mars bar, and she was eating the Mars bar, and then I asked some question which meant she had to confess, and she had this Mars bar. And it's extraordinary what it does, extraordinary. I used it also in Dead Ringers. There's a scene where I have a Mars bar. I used it in Lolita, where there's a scene where where the headmistress of Lolita's school says something which makes me think she might be on to me, and I'm eating a cake at the time. It's a very useful comic sort of, and I think the egg was to take the edge off in much the same way. Food can be very useful. It can be a pain in the ass, but if you're doing an eating scene, and I tend not to eat very much then, but at moments it's quite useful to have a, you know, it just helps. Dead Ringers.
I just want to say something. There's been a fraud perpetrated here tonight. The whole thing's a fraud. He's Beverly and I'm Elliot.
I watched The Fly and about 3 of his films. I found them pretty tough. But Dead Ringers I thought was a slight move away from that, although it still had the same sort of eeriness. I remember he had to come over to London because my agent at the time, Sam Cohen, in New York, kept refusing to send me the script, and so David had to come to London and give me the script, and I read it, and I said, well, this is great, but, you know, isn't the technique of the twinning actually going to kill any sort of brio that I could find for those characters? And he said, well, I hope not, I don't know. But so I went over to Canada and did a test, a twinning test on video, just for a day, to see what the process would be. And I discovered that it didn't. It didn't. I found it quite freeing in a way. It was an interesting one because to start off with, we shopped separately with the 2 twins. I had 2 separate dressing rooms. And I remember first or second day when we watched the rushes of the first day, sitting in there, and at the end of it, I said, David, it's a disaster. I said, anyone can tell the difference between these 2. They're not alike at all. He said, oh, he said, what are we going to do about that? I said, well, I swapped all the clothes over so they were all dressed much the same, and I found a way of trying to make them identical on the outside, but finding an inner energy in both of them that was different. So I could switch that energy spot. I think there's one scene where he has to pretend to be being the other twin.
2 cappuccini per favore, and quickly. The Countess is a tigress until she's got her caffeine in the morning.
Hey, come on. Not that bad.
You're a little bit smoother in real life.
So I tried to think of all the mannerisms that he might have, the other twin, but not change the energy spot, so the audience would know which twin it was pretending to be the other, without the people on the screen, the characters in the scene, knowing that it was the other one. I always know how other people should play a scene. You know, people I'm playing opposite. I thought, if you did that, it would be wonderful. And when you're playing both of them, you can do that. I've got my mirror person who never appears, a lovely actor he was, who always played my eye line and me, the other twin, and we never see him, but he's always there. And I watched him, I thought, oh, I'm not doing it like that, I'm going to do it like that. That's how I'm going to do it. All right, okay. And then I go around and I do it like that. You know, we develop the scenes in the way I love developing them, in that, you know, you're on the set, me, my stand-in, Peter Sushitsky, the cameraman, and David. And we say, okay, how are we going to do this? And we work it out quite quickly, because there's not many of us there. Then we get the cameraman in and we say, this is what we're going to do, how are you going to shoot it? He decides. And then we get the crew in, they watch, and then I go away while they set it all up. It was so clear and clean and efficient. I really felt on that movie that it was a partnership, which is a wonderful feeling to have with a director. Reversal of fortune.
Well, before you assume I'm guilty, won't you hear my story?
No. Never let defendants explain. Puts most of them in an awkward position.
How do you mean?
Lying.
But I give you my word as a gentleman.
I didn't want to do it. I thought it was a very tasteless idea, because the man was still alive, his wife was still alive, the children were still alive. And it was Glenn Close, really, who said to me, listen, if you don't do it, someone else will, so it'll still be made. And she said it's a, you know, a fantastic story in a way, and so she persuaded me to do it. But I found it very difficult to get inside Claus. I watched him a lot. I watched him on the Barbara Walters shows and all those shows he was doing. He was obviously clearly enjoying being an enigma. I met with John Richardson, a great friend of his, the art critic, who'd known him all his life, who said, play him like a bad actor. And I said, oh, okay, not sure how to do that, all right. He's a perfect weekend guest. I got these sort of, just these phrases thrown at me, and I thought, okay, I know the perfect weekend guest. You're quite glad after 2 days when they go, but they're great fun for 2 days.
What do you give a wife who has everything? An injection of insulin. How are my prawns? How can one define a fear of insulin? Claustrophobia.
But I still couldn't get inside him, and then I thought, well, what about my dad? Because I've been watching him in court, you know, being very suave and very sort of, you know, pleasant and whatever, British, although he wasn't British, of course. I thought if my dad had been caught up in, for some reason, in a situation similar and taken to court, how would he deal with it? And I thought he'd probably sort of be the same as Claus. He'd be charming, and he'd, you know, keep his feelings to himself and just deal with it and go to the dinner parties and be polite and charming. I thought, well, I'm very like my dad, so maybe that's how I would deal with it, and that's how I got into Claus. And Claus used to write to me on little postcards after I'd made the film, when I was doing interviews, and he'd say, no, I wouldn't agree with that, and I wasn't like that, and et cetera, et cetera. So I had these postcards, but I'd never met him. His great friend Getty, who's a neighbour of mine in England, Getty used to throw these cricket matches. And I was sitting watching the cricket one day in Oxfordshire, and lovely, and I heard this voice behind me, you see, I'm not fat. And I turned around, and there he was, and I said, I never said you were fat, I said you were a bigger man than me, which you are. I mean, he's bigger, you know, he's just a bit of a bear of a man. He said, oh, I see. He said, do you ever see Alan Dershowitz these days? I said, no, not since the movie have I seen him. He said, so I understand he's representing Leona Helmsley and Michael Tyson at the moment. I said, yes, I read that. He said, you haven't been asked to play either of them, have you? I knew it would be no use asking him, what did you do? You know, I had to make up my own mind, which I did. I mean, I knew the odds were in my favour for the Oscars. Although I was up against some fantastic actors, I just knew that maybe my time had come. So, but I was preparing the face for losing. And then they mentioned my name, and I thought, oh, I have to use that face. So I stood, and I'm a bit of a kisser anyway, I'm afraid, a kisser and a hugger. So whoever was next to me, I think my agent, I'd probably kissed her, and then I moved out. And there indeed was Madonna, and I thought, well, I know Madonna. Well, I didn't know her, but I gave her a kiss, because, you know, whatever. And then there was Michael Jackson, and I very nearly gave him a kiss. I don't think I would have won the Oscar had I not made Dead Ringers with David. I mean, I think Dead Ringers was a eye-catching performance. Not saying it was good or bad, but it was eye-catching. And yet the movie was not an Oscar movie because of the subject matter, you know, it's not. So, but I think the fact that I hadn't been nominated for that the year before, and then Reversal of Fortune happened, I think it added. I think there were a lot of people in Hollywood who said he should have been nominated last year. Hence the fact that I mentioned David Cronenberg during my acceptance speech. Lolita.
Make your tickets to Hourglass Lake tomorrow.
Me?
Mm-hmm. She'll do anything you say. She's getting a thing about you.
Whisper, whisper. What are you two so cozy about?
I was afraid when they asked me to do it, I have to say this is another film which Glenn Close told me to do. I felt, because I knew what had happened, I mean the original Lolita, and I just thought, at this point, it was later, you know, than the original, and I thought, this is a very difficult subject for today. And I thought, well, I'm not sure this is a subject I should do. So anyway, Glenn said, listen, it's a great story, a classic story, and Adrian is a great director. Well, I said to my agent, Fred Spector at CAA, I said, Fred, listen, I'll do it, but make sure I'm paid enough not to work for the next 3 years, because I don't think I will. Of course, because Adrian's a load of fun. We had a lot of fun. Dominic was wonderful. She'd never acted before. We did a test in New York with a girl who was very experienced from doing work in Los Angeles, television work, and Dominic, who had made a self-made video with a friend of hers of a scene from the book and sent it to Adrian. And Dominic was a very bright girl, wacky, and we did the test, the two of them, and Adrian and I talked, and he said, what do you think? I said, well, it has to be Dominic, because you don't know where she's going to come from. She's just fantastic. She's there. She's everything you hope for with an actress. She hadn't been told how to behave, what to do, how to do. She just was a kid. I think a lot of kids, just if they're natural, which she was, she just produced an enormous, wonderful texture, which an actress who was trained and, you know, behaving might not have done.
Are there things you ever do to try and get to that like childlike state? Where
Always. I mean, always. I try not to prepare too much, just to be on the cusp of not knowing what I'm doing. And I try to surprise the person I'm playing with. I mean, I directed a little, a rock video once for Carly Simon called Tired of Being Blonde. I filmed it, I cut it, I watched it, and I thought, this is really boring. And then I went into all the outtakes to find when something actually happened. Something went wrong and somebody actually had to, and I've knitted them all in and it made it better. Not completely good, but not bad. And I realized that what the camera loves is when something happens. And being an English actor, I'm trained to sort of know what I'm doing all the time. That's not what the camera likes. It likes a reality which almost surprises the person who's giving it. And to get into that state of relaxation and of unknowingness, I think is important, and I help myself by not preparing too much and being quite bold. The mission. The 18th century hobo is not easy, but it was played by somebody who lived out in the Caribbean, and we shot the mission mostly around Cartagena. George Martin played the 18th century hobo, and so he came in, which was very nice of him, and he spent a couple of weeks teaching me to play this desperately difficult instrument. I mean, it's a killer, absolute killer. We had this piece of music, which I played. I was very proud of myself. We filmed the scene with me playing it, actually miming to it, but nevertheless miming to the tune. Fingering was right. Then they replaced it and gave me a bit of wood, and that's what the Indians broke, not the beautiful instrument I'd been playing. Ennio Morricone had written this wonderful theme, which was not what I had played. So whenever I see the movie now, I think the fingering's wrong, but I don't think many people see the fingering, but there we are. Working with De Niro was, at the beginning, very difficult, He was going through a period in his career where he was being very la mama, or whatever it is, doing a huge number of takes. I mean, about huge, like sort of 55, 56. He stopped doing that once he directed a film of his own. He realized that you really can't do that. He didn't want me to play the role. He wanted to have a relationship like Sam Waterston and Dis Pran in The Killing Fields. One actor, one person. He wanted his great friend Elia Kazan to play the role. The role was actually written for my father-in-law, Cyril Cusack, an Irish actor. 10 years before we actually made the film, Cyril Cusack was too old by the time we came to make the film. So I auditioned with Bob, a very difficult scene where I had to try and make him recant his guilt. That was a disaster. He sat there, didn't say anything for 45 minutes while I tried to make him sort of soften up a bit. And I then had to go back, I was here in New York, I had to go back to my evening performance and The Real Thing. And when we finished the play, and I came back to London, and I hadn't really heard anything, and I called David Putnam, who was the producer of the mission. I said, David, have you cast that role yet, Father Gabriel? He said, no, I haven't. He said, it's very difficult. He said, I want a young man because there's a lot of bugs out there, and I don't want an old man getting ill and all of that. And I said, well, you know, I'd love to do it. He said, would you? I said, yeah. Yeah, I would. He said, well, does Roland know that? Roland Joffe, the director. I said, no, I don't know. He said, well, give him a call. So I called him. He was in Cartagena preparing. And I said, Roland, it's Jeremy. David says I have to tell you that I want to play this role. He said, well, come on out here. And so I packed the following day and went out and did it. And Bob was furious, absolutely furious. The last thing he wanted was an English actor, an Englishman and an actor. And he used that for his dislike of this priest for the first half of the film. It's so much so that he wouldn't talk to me. English actors are the worst because they've got technique and, you know, and they're actors. And he wanted a person, you know. Eventually we had a blazing row in the middle of the jungle in the makeup bus, and everybody left us alone because they knew what was happening. And we called each other every name under the sun and just let it out. And then sort of at the end of that, it was all right. And we had a great dinner that night with some wonderful pasta that Tookie Smith, his girlfriend at the time, had made down by the sea, and smoked a very good joint. And Bob and I have been like that ever since. Very, very, very close, but it was a difficult start. Batman versus Superman. Thermal imaging is showing me 24 hostiles on the 3rd floor. Why don't I drop you off on the 2nd? I mean, fortunately, the director said to me, what's going to be your outfit? What do you want to do? I just remember going to dinner with John Paul Getty, who I mentioned before with Claus, but who I say is a neighbour. And we went on to his estate. We went through the gate and passed through there. And 2 people came and opened the doors, and out we got, and we walked up to the front door, and there was a very nice gentleman saying, we'd take your umbrellas or whatever. And then we walked in, somebody opened the door, said, would you like a glass of champagne? Another gentleman. And then we were shown into the sort of the main drawing room. Somebody said to me, he said, you know all those people at SAS, every one of them. And I thought, oh, that's it. So when I came to play Alfred, that's what I thought. I thought this is what this man is. He's highly trained. But he makes a great cup of coffee. He makes a great dinner. He can drive, you know, he's that guy. And for me, that's how I saw him. Fellow who can actually do everything and will really take care of you. Margin call. So, what you're telling me is that the music is about to stop, and we're going to be left holding the biggest bag of odorous excrement ever assembled in the history of capitalism. Well, I mean, everyone was interested in that crash. But strangely enough, I thought I probably wouldn't do it because my visa had run out. And they shot very, very quickly. They were shooting in New York, I was in London. Anyway, I believe calls were made to a very high level here in America to get my visa. I thought it would never come. So I thought, I'm not going to be doing this because I knew they had a really tight schedule. And although I'd done the research, I hadn't learnt the lines because I was not going to happen. And on the Sunday night, or maybe it was the Monday morning of our bank holiday in England, I got a call saying, we've got the visa, you can go, get on the plane tonight. So I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, okay. So I got on the plane and I got to New York and was taken to the building which they'd rented to make the movie, which was full of the makeup department, the costume department, the sets, and everything. It was all done in that building. I was given my costume, and the following morning, makeup, bang, 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 and I go in for that conference scene, you know, when he's just flown in by helicopter, and hanging on to my lines, like thinking, I think I do. And I walked onto the set, and the table was full of all these mates who'd been acting together for the last month. And we're all chummy and funny and having a nice time, and a load of actors, like a sort of, you know, cocktail party or something. So I thought, this is not right at all. Anyway, the director said, you just run through it. So I ran through it, and they were all very chummy. And he said, do you want to shoot it? I said, let me just do one more rehearsal. And so I walked in, and I yelled at everybody, just completely off script, just yelling about how they looked, how they were sitting, what they were doing, what. And I said, okay, and I left, and I said to the director, let's shoot. And I came in, and they were all thinking, he's having a nervous breakdown, this man. He's completely off his head. But it gave a great attention to the scene, which was good.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Sullivan. Do you care to know why I'm in this chair with you all? I mean, why I earn the big bucks?
Yes.
I never prepare enough. That's my problem as an actor. I remember feeling unprepared for that. But I quite like that. I married an actress, and she's always terribly prepared. I mean, really, she's prepared everything. And I try to keep it sort of like, you know, if I'm going to a tennis match, I hope I'm practiced up, I hope I'm fit, I hope all my muscles are working right, but I don't know what's going to come across that net. And I can't plan for that. So that's the sort of attitude I try to get onto a set with, knowing that I've got the equipment to chuck back whatever ball's chucked at me. Brideshead Revisited.
What do you think of this?
Golly.
I was an actor in the West End, young Vic and that sort of thing, and I remember I had I was doing a play, a Simon Gray play, and my name was over the door, on the marquee in the theatre, and I thought, well, this is very good for my ego, but actually who's coming to see it, because it's me, because nobody knows me really, apart from the London theatre scene. I must do either a movie or a television film, or a television series, and I thought probably a television series because they seem to make their mark more than movies at the moment. And I was doing a play in Greenwich later on, and a man called George Howard came, and it was a friend of my wife's, a friend of mine, came to a show, and we were sitting having a drink afterwards, and he said, have you read Brideshead Revisited? I said, no, I haven't, even in war, never have. He said, well, read it, because Granada Television are going to make it, I know that, because they're going to use my house, Castle Howard. So I read it, and I thought, a fantastic story, and wrote to them of Granada and said, listen, when you make the series, I'd love to be in it. They got in touch and said, would you come and play, would you play in this, and would you play Sebastian? And I said, well, I'm not really very keen on playing Sebastian. I like to play Charles, because Charles is a very interesting character, the sort of character I've been educated to be, but which I hope I will shed one of my skins during my life. But that journey is very interesting, and I love that sort of retired, quiet Englishman. He's not really sure of anything, his sexuality or his talent or anything. It was fantastic for me because it was the equivalent really in time of about 6 feature films, and we shot it like a feature film. And I was always there because I was the host of the party, the eye of the book, really. I learned a huge amount and got very comfortable around the camera and about the whole process of filmmaking. When I was making a French film with Sven Nykvist directing, a film based on Proust's story, Un Amour de Swann, I remember sitting in the rushes watching, and I said to Sven, Sven, we saw this last night. And he said, no, we didn't. We shot this last night. I said, but I've seen this before. And I realized that I'd begun to have double vision. In other words, I knew what the shot was while I was doing it, and I could see it, both what the camera was seeing and in my imagination when I was playing it. And so when I came to see it on the screen, I'd already seen that. And Brideshead helped me with that, just helped me get used to the relationship between the camera and the actor. The morning show. I was hoping you'd use your talents for something more significant than daytime television.
Right.
But that's water under the bridge. So, I thought we were not talking. Why are you here? Somebody tell you I was dying? Well, I played Jennifer Aniston's father, a relationship which had sort of broken down, a man we know a bit about, but not a lot. And we had to create that relationship and find how it could be mended, if it's going to be mended. You know, Jennifer I was well aware of as an actress and thought she was tremendous. So I was very happy. I thought, well, you know, I do sort of fairly small European films most of the time and whatever, and it'd be good for me to get into an American series and have a bit of fun, so I'll go and do that. The first couple of scenes, you know, I was a bit aware that it was you know, an intricate mechanism that was working around me. You know, you have to sort of muscle your own energy into that. Once we got a couple of scenes on camera, I began to feel comfortable. It was a very happy experience. The only thing I didn't like was it's filmed so far away from where I live. I mean, I live in England and Ireland, and they shoot in Los Angeles because of children. So it's a long way to go. But apart from that, it was joyous. And it's very well written, and you know, we work on the script up until the moment the camera turns, refining, trying to get, you know,